Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to the Niche Cast, coming at you on the 26th of March, 2024. We are from the niche-case.com, where you can read about Aotearoa sporting matters. Got a recap of the Warriors win over the Raiders. We've got All Whites coverage. We've got football Ferns coverage. We've got Plunket Shield. We've got a fresh White Ferns yarn mid-T20 series. They're playing their fourth T20 tomorrow on Wednesday, and you can check in with some key stats there. Flying Kiwis is live on the website. We've got plenty of Wellington Phoenix deep dives as well. Lots of Aotearoa sporting information on our website, theniche-case.com, and this is where we have a little chat, a little chinwag, bit of a kōrero about some key themes, some key ideas across our Aotearoa sporting beat, much of which was brainstormed in our Monday newsletter via Substack, thenichecase.substack.com. It's completely free to sign up. You can jam it on, it's a Monday and Friday dispatch sent straight to you, full of niche case bits and bobs, all the links to our website deep dives, all the podcast information, as well as things written just for that newsletter via Substack. And if you do appreciate that, if you do want to help us out, lend us a hand, because we kind of need it, but that's all good. We kind of need it. You can upgrade your free Substack subscription to a paid Substack subscription, and then you can access our subscriber podcast, which we record on Thursdays. And that is also available for members of the Patreon whānau. So you can jam a Patreon subscription, you can jam a paid Substack subscription, and then listen to our Thursday podcast, which is just an extra podcast. The Niche Cast comes out every Tuesday, full of Aotearoa sporting information, and then we back it up on Thursday. And just checking our menu for this week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. That means we're going to be recapping Plunket Shield cricket on our subscriber podcast, because those games will be finished on Wednesday, and we do have that unofficial final between Wellington and Northern Districts in Hamilton. So we will be touching on a few, well, not a few, we'll be going deep into Plunket Shield cricket on our Thursday podcast, as well as a bit of rugby league, reacting to team lists. Maybe the All Whites or football Ferns will have another game by then.
All Whites will have, yeah, Tunisia on Wednesday morning, so that'll be good to go as well.
Beauty. So that is a bonus podcast for those who fund our mahi via Substack or Patreon. And if you do want to make a one-off donation, we've got to buy me a coffee as well for you there. But that is to say, subscriber podcast is a low-key banger. And it's strictly for the generous folks helping us out. And we just do that every week as a little bonus for you. Otherwise, your presence here with us now is glorious. Hit us up on YouTube. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, but a TikTok as well. Serving up the Kiwi Sports highlights. And of course, if you listen to this on Apple and Spotify, big up to you. Doing our best for Aotearoa sport. And we just cover what we want to. We just do what we want to do. So if you support it, there's plenty of ways to help out. Of course, we're pōharas. You might be a pōhara as well. It's all good. You can subscribe. You can hit up the website. You can do lots of free things as well. And then there's more generous channels that you can offer as well. So big up to everyone who is absorbing niche case airwaves and energies. There's got to be a better word. Sound waves, airwaves, frequencies. Frequency is a good one. Big up to everyone absorbing the niche case frequency. We're out here. I was listening to the Logan Van Beek podcast. I think it's the follow on, the follow through. Might want to double check that while we're having a little chin wag, because on the need a score. Not quite as easy as I thought here. Logan Van Beek podcast. The follow through with LVB. He had a recent episode with Michael Bracewell. And Michael Bracewell, cricketing extraordinaire, fantastic yarns, fantastic listen. But there was plenty of mindfulness chat in that podcast. Michael Bracewell talking about how he feels. I think it was a 10-minute meditation, and then a bit of Logan Van Beek just talking about mindfulness, aware of the thoughts. And I was like, well, that's why we do the mindfulness segment. You know, if it's good enough for the beast, if it's good enough for LVB, it's good enough for us as well. So let's get our podcast started with a bit of mindfulness.
Yeah, cricket's got to be the most mindful sport, eh? Like just the one in which that is the most beneficial, but also the one in which that's like the most required as well. It's yeah. Well, I mean, there's been stories about Kane Williamson as obviously someone who has a bit of a I don't know, like a Buddha presence out there at the crease. People have talked about him being into a little bit of the old meditations. Haven't got a meditative type one today though. I got a quote from Lewis Carroll, who's the bloke who wrote Alice in Wonderland back in the day. So a little bit more of a humorous, whimsical one. He said, "Everything is funny if you can laugh at it." And you know what I like about that is the idea of it's basically just saying you can choose to laugh at everything, and if you choose to not take things seriously, you don't have to take them seriously. Like that's up to you. You make that decision. And I'd also suspect that if you do choose to take things a lot more seriously and laugh at a whole lot more stuff, that's probably going to open you up in a much more like positive disposition in the rest of your life, even when you're not laughing. Like I think that's just going to be something that, and laughter is medicine as well, isn't it?
Well, it's hard to be grumpy when you're laughing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it seems really difficult. So good mindfulness. Appreciate you there. We'll have a little chuckle. Ha 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 ha. Nice
Yeah,
laughter.
we'll laugh our way through this podcast.
Righto. Sneaking under the radar, we've got NBL basketball. Two types of NBL basketball. It's like white bread, brown bread. Except these are varieties of whole grain bread because they're both exceptionally good and healthy for your sporting soul. Australian NBL, those finals are still ongoing. We got Shea Illy, we got Tommy Vodanovic, and another development player.
Yeah, Walter Brown's there, Flynn Cameron as well with Melbourne on Shaylee's side. Shaylee's the only one who's really playing, but he is having a big influence as you'd expect. He's been a key player.
I did see, was it McVeigh who had a nice winner? What's the
Yeah,
status
an
in the NBL
insane long shot
finals?
there. So that was like not quite a buzzer beater, but because there were no timeouts, it was basically a buzzer beater. So to throwing him up from a few meters deep of the 3-point line in order to give Tasmania a last gasp victory when it looked like Melbourne, because this is after Melbourne fumbled an inbounds as well. Like they had the ball in control. You get the ball in, they're going to foul you. You shoot a few free throws, you probably won the game. They couldn't get the inbounds right, and then McVeigh just scoops up, throws a wild shot down, and swings the series pretty drastically because Melbourne won the first game heavily. In the second game, they were up 15 points in the third quarter. Looked like they were going to cruise towards that one as well. And if they do that, they're 2-0 up and one game away from the title. However, Shaley had some foul trouble in that game. He was really good in game two. I think he scored 20 points, but he had some foul trouble and he fouled out with his team up 1 point with about a minute to go. And then they ended up losing by about 5 points. So big swing after he went off. And then, yeah, late drama in game three. Suddenly Tasmania are 2-1 up and Melbourne have to win the last two games in order to do what everyone expected them to do, which was convert their favorite status into another championship. So I think Melbourne are definitely good enough to do that. But it's proven to be a whole lot trickier than expected, and it's going to take a game five for them to be able to do so. Before they can even do that, they got to worry about just winning game four to get to that stage. So exciting stuff. And yeah, Shaley is right in amongst it as an important player, as we fully expect, and he will be just as important moving forward in the rest of it. The other three Kiwis who are sort of in there, I think Vodanovic got like a minute or so at the end of the first game because it was a blowout, and I think Flynn Cameron might have snuck on for a bit at the same time. Nothing since. So the last two games we haven't seen the fringe guys, but they're around soaking up a NBL finals atmosphere. And I think all three of those guys, will be popping up for New Zealand NBL. Not Shea Elliott. I think he'll probably, he's a he's above that. He might just have a rest, or maybe he'll play some NBL one stuff in Australia. But Vodanovic is playing NBL. Walter Brown's playing. Flynn Cameron will be playing his first domestic season, so that's all good stuff.
I was looking for Shea Illy on the New Zealand NBL depth chart delivered by Tony O'Connor on Twitter. He is Tony ONZ71. He's got a full depth chart of every NBL team, and I didn't see Shea Illy anywhere there. So I'm glad you clarified that. We do have Tommy Vodanovic. He's with the Tuatara. Where's Flynn Cameron going to be?
Flynn Cameron is with, was it the Phi? No, it's Taranaki is. He's playing for Taranaki. So alongside Carlin Davison, that'll be fun.
And of course, Walter Brown is with the Canterbury Rams. The NBL, the New Zealand NBL, starts tomorrow, Wednesday. Canterbury Rams versus Nelson Giants, and then it's just games every other day. And I love a bit of NBL basketball, and I suspect a lot of these little gyms, a lot of these little arenas around Aotearoa will be full of Kiwi basketball fans. In the same way a lot of other sports are drawing in big crowds. Might touch on that in a jiffy. So I am excited for NBL basketball. I believe the women's competition will be happening at the same time.
I think they might overlap, but it doesn't start yet. Yeah, Toi. That starts a little bit later. So
right.
Yeah, we'll see.
So full crop of NBL teams, but we do have a new addition, the Phi. Where are they from?
That is like sort of Tauranga Bay of Plenty region, I think. They call themselves the Mid-North Phi, but I think they actually just call themselves the Phi and don't give a region, which is a bit weird for a regional competition to not highlight the region you're from. But that is a new team in the men's competition, but they have been a presence in the women's competition for the last 2 years, I think.
So to set us up, we will be touching on this throughout the season, key players, funky bits and bobs that we do see, and any anecdotes about crowd sizes that we do observe and just the arena atmosphere. Because as I said a few weeks ago, basketball, you do get a bit of DJ action in the arena, a bit of hype man's involved, unlike the Aotearoa Warriors at Mount Smart. Who are you really interested in as just individuals that you're going to be like, oh, this guy's playing, he's playing for this team, and he's coming off an interesting Aussie NBL season. Maybe he's not involved in Australian NBL, but he is a big timer in Aotearoa who might earn a contract in the Australian NBL. Just key players, intriguing players for you ahead of the Aotearoa NBL season.
Yeah, I could basically go through every team and pick out a couple. Like it's one of those things. We just had a record year for New Zealanders playing in the Australian NBL, and when those final series are done, I've sort of tracked that throughout the season. When that final series is done, I might even write about it. Or at the very least, I'll get the list out on the Substacker and tally that up compared to other seasons. But we've definitely had more players than ever before. I'll see what that looks like in terms of minutes and whatnot. But not all of them, because some of those guys do hang around and play NBL one sort of reserve grade off-season basketball in Australia, I guess, because many of them just live in Australia. So, that is the local competition if you're there. Also, there's like, if you're trying to win NBL contracts, then yeah, that helps to be close. But there is also quite there's quite a relationship between the New Zealand and Australian leagues as well, because Ironically, the Perth Wildcats have the closest relationship, not so much the Breakers. The Breakers last year, we did see a lot of one of their assistant coaches was coaching Franklin Bulls, and then they had a lot of the sort of fringe players were hanging out there. That's spread out quite a bit since. Like I'm looking at the Bulls team, and Sam Timmins is there, Ethan Rusbatch, Dom Kalman-Poto is there, so that's one. Isaac Davidson, so like guys who have Breakers connections, but only really one of those guys is still a Breaker. So that doesn't seem to be quite as much of a theme as it was last year, but Otago Nuggets and Perth Wildcats, they share ownership. So that's probably why Jack Andrew, Ty Webster, Dante Russo-Nance are all playing for the Otago Nuggets this year, having all been with the Perth Wildcats this season. The other Kiwi at the Perth Wildcats is Corey Webster. He's playing for the Auckland Tuatara, who are coached by Aaron Young, who's an assistant coach at the Perth Wildcats. So there's two teams there that have a bit of a connection there. That's also one of the things that stands out when you look across these things. It's like the players, yeah, but also the quality of coaching that we have in this country in basketball. And you just see these names spread out, you know, Seco Coronel at the Saints and Mike Fitchett with the Giants, Judd Flavel and Canterbury, and like, you know, et cetera, go on and on. There's enough coaches that every team has a guy who could, or should be working with as like an Australian NBL assistant, if not better, at some point, you know. Team-wise, players-wise, Auckland Tuatara were the team to beat last season, and then the Canterbury Rams beat them in the final, which was exciting. Nothing's changed there with the Tuatara. They've swapped out a couple players, but it's kind of the same thing. They just have like an outstanding starting five. Like, imagine, in fact, you don't have to imagine. This is reality. But Rob Lowe, Tom Vodanovic, Ruben Tarangi, Cam Glidden, Corey Webster. You just get the best starting five you can. Don't worry about imports there. They might add some dudes in as the season goes along if that comes to the play. Oh, I guess Cam Glidden's an import, isn't he? Because he's Australian. But grab a top-notch starting five. Couple of like Nick Barrows on the bench, like a couple of these kind of guys, like sort of solid local veterans, and then just respect the fact that Auckland basketball is really strong. New Zealand basketball is really strong. Just fill out the team with the best prospects of the region, which is what they did last year. It's what they're doing this year again. So I think they're favourites once more. Canterbury will be exciting. They've got that sort of Canterbury core that they always seem to have. Taylor Britt, obviously, but Walter Brown, Max Starling now, Kaya Isaac as well, maybe, sort of building in around him. The Nuggets with Ty Webster. I mean, Ty Webster might be the single most talented player in this league. Who knows? But like the Saints with Leafa and Harris, who are two good, solid NBL, like Australian level players who've coming off very good seasons. Harris definitely his best season. Leafa, you could make a case. I think Toy Smith-Milner's with them as well. Yes, he is. So the Saints, after a bad season last year, they'll be looking to bounce back, et cetera, et cetera. Like there's cases for pretty much all these teams. Like Carlin Davison and Flynn Cameron at the Taranaki Airs is going to be fantastic. Looking forward to that. Callum McRae, I thought, was really good for Nelson last year. He's moved to Southland. So we could be here for a while, but we probably should move the podcast on. But suffice to say, the NBL is going to be good. The NBL is always good. It's going to be just as good this season.
Simmer it down to one player. Who's your most interesting player heading into the season?
I don't know how to simmer that down to one player, but I'll just pick one out of the hat out of many options. I'm going to say Rob Lowe coming off an MVP campaign last year, then retiring from the Australian NBL, then getting coaxed back in to be an injury replacement for the first couple months of the season with Melbourne, where, you know, they probably wouldn't mind having him back about now, given they've got two must-win games in the finals to come. But yeah, he did his bit at the start. He's still retired. Like, he went back into retirement effectively, I guess, but that retirement doesn't apply to the New Zealand NBL, which is good to see, because Rob Lowe is still absolutely good enough to dominate this league, as he did last year, as he will potentially do again this season. So it'll be like, you know, having Rob Lowe, Ruben Tarangi, and Corey Webster on the same team again will be like the Breakers about 5 years ago. It was a little bit of a throwback there that, you know, it might not have been expecting, but it'll be fun to see.
Given that Rob Lowe is just straight up one of the best players in the NBL, it goes without saying he's probably the best big man in Aotearoa basketball right now, and especially not Aotearoa basketball, because I'm sure there's some dudes overseas, but just as far as
Stephen Adams is pretty good.
Yeah, he's all right. But the Houston Rockets are looking a bit interesting at the moment as well. Like, that's cool. But Rob Lowe, probably the best big man in the NBL. So if you do love a bit of getting the ball to Rob Lowe down low, check in with the Auckland Tuatara. The Warriors. Wait, did you say the Canterbury Rams were the champions last year?
Yeah, I did say that.
Because we've talked a lot about, well, we've talked about all the interesting hot pockets of Aotearoa sport, and I routinely highlight Canterbury as an excellent hot pocket of Aotearoa sport, and keen observers of the niche cast and the niche cage would have noted that I talk a lot about the Kiwi-NRL juniors from the South Island and the Canterbury region. This is a layered thing where you've got the Bulldogs connection with Canterbury Rugby League, but then you've got Kiwi-NRL juniors from the Canterbury region all throughout the Warriors system, all throughout every NRL team system. And we've talked about it. All the players from the South Island, all the talent coming out of the South Island, all the things that are happening with these little partnerships and whatnot. Then we get a decent crowd for a trial game last year. Then we get a decent crowd for a trial game this year. And what happens when the Warriors take on the Raiders in Christchurch? You get the best crowd of the season, and a crowd in Christchurch that can, I reckon, if you like put them face to face, the Mount Smart faithful versus that crowd in Christchurch, I'm kind of leaning towards that crowd in Christchurch and how vibrant the atmosphere was. And also, I think my comments about the Mount Smart announcer are tinging my hype for the Christchurch crowd, because the folks in Christchurch just started their own chants. Right? And there's this clear, it was so weird, but it was so beautiful. At Mount Smart Stadium, the Stink lost to the Sharks starting the season. It was a big crowd. But then you had this announcer dude who was just creating artificial chants that went nowhere. We go down to Christchurch. I didn't even know there was an announcer there. But I also noted there was a lack of music. So I don't know what, I actually prefer less music, less loud blaring music at these kind of sporting events, but they're trying to create an atmosphere and all that, so that's all right. But after watching this announcer dude at Mount Smart generate artificial chants that went nowhere, then we go to Christchurch, big crowd, jam-packed, heaving, and they're starting their own chants. Not only are they starting their own chants, and they are so connected with what's happening in the game of footy. So if there's a slightly forward pass, then they're all up in arms. If there was a slow play the ball, they're all causing a ruckus. That's what you want to see. Educated fans involved. But it sounded like they just created their own chant with the ooh, ah, up the wahs. Like, I don't know if that, too. Great I don't know if that's like, I've never heard it before. And then suddenly these fans in Christchurch are just starting their own chant. I'm curious to ask you, given how I have hyped up rugby league in the South Island, and I'm sure I'm guessing you did catch some of the Warriors versus Raiders game in Christchurch. Like, you hear me hyping it up all the time. Then you see what happens when the Warriors play a regular season game there against the Raiders. Are you just in the back of your mind like, I kind of expected this. This is the norm, considering everything we have talked about leading into that game?
Yeah, sort of. Because there was this was a logical extension of, you get a big crowd for a preseason game, you're obviously going to get like something close to a sellout, and I think it pretty much was a sellout, wasn't it, for the for a regular season game? But just because it was expected doesn't necessarily mean it's not like a massive achievement, right? Like, I think it would have been unexpected for people who weren't tapped into to seeing that, like the build up leading into that. But regardless, like with when the Golden State Warriors are winning NBA championships over and over, that's still amazing. Just because they won the last one doesn't mean that winning the next one isn't amazing. Like Michael Jordan winning 3 in a row twice, like whatever. Like the fact that they sold it out just because we thought it was going to be a sellout that's still a pretty incredible achievement. And I guess the best praise I can give that is to say that, like, the I I don't think watching it from home there was any tangible difference between whether that was a game in Christchurch or a game at Mount Smart. Like Mount Smart gets an incredible atmosphere. No idea why they feel they need to try to boost it with artificial stuff when it's already pretty much the best like game day experience going around. That in Christchurch, with I don't know how many people would have been like the Mount Smart faithful who traveled down, but I don't think very many. I don't think there needed to be any because Christchurch brought that themselves for that game, which is insane. Like that's just, we saw it coming, but also it's still insane. That's still fantastic, incredible achievement, like incredible atmosphere, just good rugby league stuff. And credit to the Warriors organization, I guess, as well, that there is this just like this cultural snowball effect around that team. Even after that, had a couple wobbly performances to start the season. There's nothing changed, and they got the victory they needed. And I guess pretty much every player who was a part of that would say that the crowd was a big factor in that, as they always do when that's the case.
Yeah, the juxtaposition of some goofy Mount Smart crowd. Not the crowd. The crowds are good, but the goofy artificial atmosphere at Mount Smart juxtaposed against what happened in Christchurch was fascinating for me. And as you said, all that happened in Christchurch after 2 losses. So that's pretty darn impressive. And before going deeper into the Warriors, I do want to highlight, because your Dragons, who suck, they not as bad as the Titans. Like respect to the Dragons, they might not be as bad as the Titans, but and I'll touch on a few young players, but I just want to see Keanu Kinney playing behind an actual good rugby league team instead of just catching the ball and running into just fizzed up defenders. Titans are going nowhere. Sucks. Griffin Neame against the Dragons. So I'm curious your experience as a Dragons fan watching Griffin Neame. Where's Griffin Neame from? He's from Greymouth, which is in the South Island. And I do tend to package, now respect to all the West Coasters. I'm not saying you're from Canterbury, you're hearty West Coast, West Side, all that other stuff. Greymouth, fantastic rugby league region. A couple of other lads from that region and Kiwi-NRL systems as well. However, a lot of the West Coast Rugby League players do participate in the wider Canterbury region of rugby league, because that's where you can get games. That's just how things operate in that area of Aotearoa. So at the same time as we had a fun, vibrant, energetic, heaving, exciting crowd in Christchurch, we've also got Griffin Neame against the Dragons playing 44 minutes, 18 runs for 178 meters, which if my mathematics is correct, that's almost 10 meters per run on 18 runs, which is ridiculous. How'd you feel watching Griffin Neame just storm through the Dragons, who is from a similar region in Aotearoa to what we're talking about with Canterbury Rugby League?
Well, let's not forget he scored a try as well, which was a fairly important try, because I don't think it was the try that put them in front, but I think it was the try that before that they got them back in range, where the Dragons had started, they were like 18-4 up. And I didn't even watch the start because I was, I just missed the start. And I jumped in, saw Kyle Flanagan throw a little dummy and run through and score, put the Dragons up big. I thought, okay, here we go. It was a little bit jaded after the previous week. Although, week one, the Dragons did beat the Titans in week one. So that's beyond doubt. They are better than the Titans. The second worst team in the NRL right now. That's all right. Like it all went downhill pretty quickly for the Dragons after that. But I did see, it's at least I got to witness young Griff got to witness young Griff have a massive performance. He's just rolling forward, and that does seem to happen a little bit against the Dragons. So I will say it's not like he did it against the Storm or the Panthers or whoever, but big performance, scored an important try, just kept running, barging through the middle all day. And the Dragons suck, but that was pretty impressive from Griffin Nate.
Young Griff also did it against Australia. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
useful. And this is part of a really interesting group of young Kiwi-NRL players. Griffin Neame made his Kiwis debut last year. Leo Thompson made his Kiwis debut last year. Talked about Keanu Kinney. There's a bit of a situation there because he's behind Jaden Campbell as the fullback. He's playing fullback because Jaden Campbell's not playing fullback. He's out injured, but the Titans suck, so there's a lot of noise about maybe you need Brimson at fullback, which would be a bummer for Keanu Kinney. But ultimately, Keanu Kinney is playing in a terrible team, and it's really hard to do good fullback stuff when you are playing in a terrible team because you're not getting any front foot ball. So Keanu Kinney's there or thereabouts. He's playing NRL footy, and he was in the Aotearoa Kiwis squad last year, as was Nafahu White. And Nafahu White he's always been a high pedigree Kiwi-NRL junior because the Roosters recruited him from Auckland while he was still at Kelston Boys High School. He's always been good. He's always been powerful, but right now he looks explosive. And I do love Siwa Wong, who he initially started out in Christchurch before moving up to Auckland. But there's if you're hyped about Siwa Wong, Nofahu White's pretty good as well, and he was in the Aotearoa Kiwis squad last year. Matthew Tomoko. He's all right. He's pretty good. He's a young centre. He made his debut for the Kiwis last year. Xavier Willison. He was fantastic for the Broncos in their loss against the Panthers. We've talked about Dean Mariner. Both of them from Aotearoa. Rocco Berry's all right. He's a vacuum in defence. I do love watching Rocco Berry in defence for the Warriors, and we'll expand on that in a jiffy. But ultimately, the youngsters from Aotearoa in the Kiwi-NRL bracket, whether they want to play for Aotearoa Kiwis or not, I'm not too fussed. Because guys like Leo Thompson, Nofahu White, Wiremu Greg, Keanu Kinney, Matthew Tomoko, they have entered the Kiwis equation. Rocco Berry was playing for New Zealand A last year as well. But regardless of what team they want to represent internationally, they are Kiwi-NRL juniors. They did play junior footy in Aotearoa. These aren't situations like others who are born in New Zealand, they move to Australia when they're 2 years old, or someone like Remus Smith or Bailey Simonson who want to play for Aotearoa as part of or Scott Sorensen with the family lineage. These are juniors from Aotearoa who were recruited by NRL teams specifically because of their footy talent, and they're all playing at a ridiculously high level in the NRL right now, which tells you all you need to know about the talent coming from Aotearoa. If I just say Griffin Neame, Rocco Berry, Matthew Tomoko, Keanu Kinney, Nofahu White, these dudes are really good NRL players, and Griffin Neame's having his moments. Tomoko's scored that try against the Warriors in Christchurch. I'm just loving the youngsters from Aotearoa in the Kiwi-NRL bracket. They're all shining, so shout out to them. And also on the topic of Canterbury Rugby League, you need to learn about Sasaya Alatini. He's a Hornby junior from Christchurch, and every week when I do my little Kiwi-NRL highlight try clips, he's there. And he's scoring tries, running like a winger, but he's an edge forward. And he is a product of that partnership between Canterbury Rugby League and the Bulldogs. He went over to play junior footy, now he's playing SG Ball, and he is a high-quality Kiwi-NRL junior from the Christchurch region, and there's no shortage of them, as well as those younger Kiwi-NRL players operating a high level in the NRL to start the season. The Warriors did defeat the Raiders in Christchurch. First win of the season. Hoorah. 18-10. And to me, this game, it's a lot easier to highlight these things in a win. But I think the Warriors win when they do embrace the set-for-set grind. And this is something we saw last season, and it was on full display against the Raiders. And I think a outcome of the set for set grind is winning games. But part of that is scoring points in the second half, which makes sense because if you're going set for set and you're better at it than the opponent, you're going to roll over them at near the end of the game when they're fatigued, when they've been chasing, when they've been battling, when they've been trying to work the ball off their try line over and over and over and over again, like Keanu Kinney has to for the Titans. But even if you're a decent team, like the Raiders, who have won a couple of games to start the season based on footy basics, complete your sets, turn the ball over down their end of the field, load up on defense and win the early tackles. But the Warriors did that better than the Raiders in this game. And that's something I've noted under Andrew Webster is just the Warriors' desire and their patience in going set for set with the opposition. And when you check in with Sean Johnson's stats, which I did highlight in our newsletter on Monday via Substack, last season and this season are the only seasons of Sean Johnson's career in which he has had over 500 kicking meters per game. And those are the only seasons he's played under Andrew Webster. We all know what that looks like. Sean Johnson getting the ball 30 meters off his try line, 40 meters off his try line, hoofing it downfield, landing at 10 meters off the opposition try line, and then usually it's Rocco Berry who's right there in front of him, ready to make a tackle. And we've talked about it before. You can kind of spot out the person who doesn't watch the Warriors because they're like, why aren't they competing for the kicks? You might get Monty Beetham on commentary. He's like, oh, they need to be competing for those kicks. Or Andrew Voss on commentary, oh, what are the Warriors doing? They're not competing for the kicks. Yeah, because they're making a tackle, brother. They're smashing the opposition.
None of them are like the Dragons. I think it was last week where Ravalawa just stands there and watches a guy run in front of him and grab a kick in his own corner for an easy try. Like, that's what not competing for the kicks looks like. Rushing up and tackling a dude as soon as he catches it is a different story, yes.
And it's very hard to come off the back fence if you catch the ball and there's a bloke right in front of you. And that's what the Warriors...
And also, that's tackle one. Like, that's tackle one down.
And the Warriors do it, and they do it over and over and over again. And I kind of feel like that style of footy is what every Warriors fan has wanted for a long time. They just wanted a team who could make their tackles, be patient, control a game of footy, and that's what the Warriors are doing right now. And it was on full display against the Raiders, especially when you've got the vacuum Rocco Berry. And I do love watching opposition teams or opposition edges come against Rocco Berry. Because I've got a vision in my head, I don't even know if this happened, but like maybe it's a Hudson Young. And he gets the ball, he's the edge forward for the Raiders, and he creeps across field over to the sideline as if Rocco Berry's not there. Because the moment you get in within a 2 meter radius of Rocco Berry, he vacuums you up. He hoovers you up. He wraps you up, tackles you on the ground, done. Whether it was Hudson Young, Ethan Strange had a couple of good moments, but again, he doesn't know about Rocco Berry. So when he gets the footy and he tries to scamper, Rocco Berry's right there. Hoovers him up. I'm saying hoover because it's a bit harder to say vacuum him up. But Rocco Berry is the vacuum. And then you've got poor old Albert Hopewade, again, had a good game. He's a solid centre. He's not Matthew Tomoko, but he's a pretty solid centre, pretty solid player. The moment he's within 2 meters of Rocco Berry, bang, see you later. And I think there's a lot to like with Rocco Berry as an attacking centre, but defensively, blokes don't get around him. And I do love watching teams realise that Rocco Berry is a vacuum. Maybe I need to switch it up. Maybe we need to go to like some sort of black hole. Some black hole on the edge of the universe.
Different kind of vacuum there. From vacuum cleaner to like vacuum in space.
Yeah. A space vacuum. That's what he
Well,
is.
he's both of those things, but depending on which perspective you are, I guess. Like for him, he's the vacuum cleaner because his tackling is so good that he just like drags guys in and down. If you're running up against him, you're running into a vacuum in space. You're running into emptiness. There's no way out of there.
I was also interested in the usage of the middle forwards. So I went and checked the minutes per game over the last 2 seasons. Tohu Harris has gone from 68 minutes to 75.3. Adam Fanua-Blake, he's gone from 59.8 down to 51.7. Mitchell Barnett has gone from 58.9 down to 56. So for Tohu Harris, after 3 games, there is an increase, which I don't like Tohu Harris playing 80 minutes. I don't really see the need for Tohu Harris to do it. Although, again, I do love watching opposition teams realize that Tohu Harris has footwork. Because you think when Tohu Harris gets the ball, he carts it up, he's going to take a settler. And you can kind of sense opposition defenses. They're in the middle. It's very slow. It's very casual. Because Tohu Harris isn't fast. Like he's not Griffin Neame bursting onto the ball. He kind of just cruises into the defensive line. Bang, footwork. So he's in between defenders now. And a lot of the highlights that came from that Raiders game featured Tohu Harris playing the footy. Then the Warriors do something. And that comes because of his footwork. And yeah, Tohu Harris has been playing footy for a long time. He's been playing in the middle for a while now as well. But you can still see opposition middle forwards kind of, oh, what's going on here? Why is this workhorse getting between us? And that's what he does. Or he passes the ball. And he's one of the best ball-playing middle forwards in the NRL, as we saw when Tom Alley made his break. He's got an increase, but I don't want to play up his increase in minutes, because I think over the course of the season, it will average out to 68 to 70 minutes. Mitchell Barnett has had a slight decrease, roughly 3 minutes per game. Fanua-Blake, on the other hand, he's down 9 minutes. And I find this interesting because everyone's like, oh, Adam Fanua-Blake, Warriors will be shit without him. Well, I think there's a lot of good players in the Warriors system who are going to do a pretty good job, and then maybe the Warriors sign someone as well. Like that can't be ruled out either. So I have no issues with the Warriors system and absorbing the loss of Fanua-Blake, but also he's playing almost 10 minutes less this season. So they're already kind of getting into that zone of Fanua-Blake playing a lesser role, not a huge lesser role, but 9 to 10 minutes less, which, given the perception of Fanua-Blake and how important he is to the Warriors, I do think is significant. So that's how the middle forwards are operating this season. I'll also highlight, like when the Warriors play the Raiders, I always feel like they can get a line break through the space in the middle. Early in the game against the Raiders, they were shifting over to the Warriors' left. The Warriors were shifting to their left a few times, and the short passing in the middle opened up space. That's when Jackson Ford made a break and he didn't pass the ball. Jackson Ford has a line break because there's 5 meters of space in front of him, and then Adam Fanua-Blake scores a try on the other side of the field, on the right edge, right on the try line. Bit of shape, but there's a gap in the Raiders' defensive line. Let alone some of the gaps like Dylan Watene-Zelezniak coming back across field, short ball, Luke Metcalf. There's a gap there. And the Warriors have done this against the Raiders consistently under the Andrew Webster era. Like anytime the Warriors play the Raiders, I have no fears about them scoring points. Because I'm always confident that they can target the gaps between the Raiders defenders. I've seen it 2 or 3 times over the last 2 seasons. Last season, we saw it a lot against the Bulldogs. The Warriors could always score points. It's a bit different because the Warriors could always score points in the middle. Whereas the Raiders, it's kind of like our short passing is going to open up space in the Raiders' defensive line. Against the Bulldogs, it's more of there's always gaps in the middle that you can target. And that's what I'm curious about when the Warriors play the Bulldogs, whenever that will be. Because that's where I'll learn the most about the Bulldogs. But having this bigger sample size against these teams, like I was just watching that game in Christchurch and I was like, well, they're already creating space in the first 10 minutes. They will not have issues scoring points against the Raiders because I've seen it before. I've got the same vibe about the Bulldogs and the Warriors and how the Warriors can target the Bulldogs middle. But of course, the Bulldogs, they're making improvements. So we'll check in with that later on in the season. What else did I have? Oh, the Tuivasa-Sheck try. He was playing fullback, right? But this goes to the point of like how to best use Roger Tuivasa-Sheck and Tuivasa-Sheck roaming. Doesn't really apply because he was playing fullback, he wasn't playing centre. But all that happened, Warriors got a turnover off a kick. They play the ball on the left side of the field. 2 passes to Tuivasa-Sheck. He runs. That's it. There's no shape. There's nothing happening. It's just 2 passes to get the ball to Roger. That's it. You don't need to do anything extravagant. You just get him the ball and let him get busy because he's a really good runner of the footy. You can go.
Oh, on top of all that, I don't know what I'm going to add. I did like just to highlight your very first point again, like about getting into the grind and wearing teams down and then capitalizing at the end. Like I was watching that game thinking through a lot of the first half, the Warriors are doing pretty well. Similar to how I felt against the Sharks, actually, for a lot of that first half. It's like the Warriors looking pretty good here. They're at home. They should be able to win from this position. And then like the Sharks, got a little bit wobbly there. Not as wobbly because there weren't as many points in this game as there were in, well, actually, no, it was almost identical, wasn't it? 16-12 versus 18-10. So, yeah, I went to the Sharks score. Let me check that. They scored just before halftime and just after halftime. So the Raiders scored just, 10 minutes before halftime and then about 14 minutes after halftime. They were up 10-6 with 20 minutes to go, 3/4 of the game down. The Raiders were winning. A game in which the Warriors, I mean, it's amplified even more because they were 0-2 at that point, and then suddenly you're losing with 20 minutes to go, your second home game of the season, big sellout crowd there to celebrate the Warriors, and you're on the brink of something dangerous, and then Luke Metcalf scores, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck scores. 2 quick tries, and suddenly they retake control of the game, they see it out from there. It's like they were in a position of wobbliness, and that's when the benefits of that sort of, the grind, the arm wrestle, the superior fitness, and just the overall 80-minute game plan and 80-minute performance, that's where the benefits of that came through at a time where they desperately needed it. Like, this wasn't a situation where they were 20 points up and could cruise. They were losing a game which they absolutely had to win in order, to get their season back on track. Early days, but still. And they did, and in that manner. And I think those are the type of victories that they were having early last season to get them into the season as well. And it's exactly the type of victory I think they needed to get them going this season as well. And very quickly, the narrative has changed, hasn't it? From, this is a little bit of a scary start to, no, these are the Warriors carrying on from last year, from what we saw. They played a couple of very good teams and lost two narrow defeats at the start, but they've just beaten what I think is a pretty good Raiders team as well. So, it's the train's back on the tracks there, I guess. And it's back on the tracks doing the kind of things that they did last year to get them going.
To your point, although it was round 15, so it was kind of mid-season, but against the Raiders, remember that was the Jared Croker 300 game. Ali Leotao makes his debut over in Canberra. The Warriors won 36-14. They scored 6 tries, and 5 of them were in the second half.
Is that the one where Sean Johnson got concussed, but then he came back on and scored a try anyway?
Yeah. So in that game, there was Luke Metcalf bursting onto a short ball, he scored a try, but Luke Metcalf also made a break down the sideline, and then they shifted. Shans Nickel-Klokstad scored a try. Guess what? Tom Alley scored a try through the middle. Like, for some reason, the Warriors can just work the Raiders over with their passing, with their shape, and with how they space out the field. So just keep that in the back of your mind when you're watching the Warriors. There's something about their style of footy which I think works well against the Raiders. And to set up the rest of the season, my intuition is that this also works against the Bulldogs really well, but again, the Bulldogs are getting better. So we'll use that to measure where the Bulldogs are at, where the Warriors are at, and see how we go. Did you have any other random NRL observations from the weekend, specifically with the Aotearoa Hugh?
Well, you got to wait till round 18 and then round 25 for the Warriors to face the Bulldogs. So unfortunately, that one's a little while away, and both these teams will look a bit different. I don't know. I guess you mentioned of Shans Nickel-Klokstad did get me wondering there, though, because that, I don't know if they did say he would only, like, the way it was announced when he got injured in preseason wasn't like they expected him to miss the first 3 rounds, but he has missed the first 3 rounds. However, that suggests maybe he'll be back soon. We'll see what the team lists look like, and I guess this afternoon or tomorrow or whatever, I don't know. But point being, he's a pretty integral part of this team that we haven't seen yet. Like, that's another level that the Warriors have to go to, is their starting fullback, who's coming off his best ever NRL season, hasn't featured yet and will soon feature for them at some point. And that he also, I think there's, because Taintel Picky's he's unfortunately taken a couple knocks throughout. So Tuivasa-Sheck has been dropping in and doing some fullback duties himself. But like, he's been good, solid. His running is impressive. I do, as a Dragons fan, have a very large hesitation about small fullbacks, though. That's more of a me problem than a Topiki problem. That's just from having watched how that goes. And yeah, unfortunately, the smaller dudes do cop a few knocks because you've got to run up against bigger dudes more often. He's done good, solid stuff, but I think there's definitely been the way the ball goes through the hands with Nickel-Klokstad involved is just an extra level on top of that, which we haven't seen yet from the Warriors, and we will at some point soon get to see that again. Like, there's another aspect to them to be unfolded yet.
No Maratane Kore, no Dylan Walker, and who is the most important Warriors player this season?
Is this Wade Egan, perchance?
Wade Egan, who was not playing against the Raiders, but the Warriors absorbed it nicely with Freddie Lussick starting and Chanel Harris-Tavita, who was pretty decent at dummy half in his little stint there as well. So plenty of scope for the Warriors to improve moving forward. I've got 2 segues in my head about the Warriors to Wellington Phoenix women, because there is plenty of scope for improvement in the Wellington Phoenix women as well, considering that they did improve from last season. And the set-for-set grind mentality style of rugby league, whatever the footballing equivalent is, it's not there with the Wellington Phoenix women. Like, they are very much a more razzle-dazzle type of footy team, but the defensive starch and your favorite word, resilience and resistance, and just kind of defensive prowess isn't there yet. But ultimately, having lost to Canberra, and I did tune into that game, and I did see Devin Jackson playing well for Canberra against the Wellington Phoenix women. Wellington Phoenix women lost that game to Canberra, thus their season, they won't be making the finals in the A-League women's competition. Ultimately, it's an improvement on last season, but if we're talking about teams and how they rise up their respective ladders, I still think the most important thing is I don't know, like it's not defense because the Warriors are a good defensive team, but they have that set for set grind mentality. And the Wellington Phoenix, they're a good defensive team, but there's also a patience and trust in their process to score goals. And you've mentioned this with Chiefy Italiano, his regime, how the Wellington Phoenix, they're looking to create better chances. They're trying to be more efficient with their attacking chances by generating better chances, as opposed to just firing shots from outside the box and difficult angles and whatnot. So there is still some of that kind of my Warriors storyline, trendy theme stuff. There is some of that in the Wellington Phoenix men. It's not there with the women, but I don't think that's a major issue right now, considering they're still trying to settle down and embed themselves as an A-League franchise. But ultimately, they did lose to Canberra. Their finals hopes are over. How are you feeling?
Yeah, well, the Canberra game, because they came into this week, no, well, last week, knowing that they kind of, after they'd lost to Sydney, they had 3 games left and they had to win them all. They won the first one midweek against Adelaide, and they won it really, won it really well. I think it was 4-0. These bunch of different goal scorers. It was like a strong second half performance there on top of everything. Contribution from substitutes. It's kind of that game fulfilled the that kind of I don't know, that kind of like stoical thing you're describing there. But I don't think stoic is a word that describes their season overall. That's the issue, is they have these games like that where you can see that it's just everything went to script. They everyone performed their roles and they got the job done and they had a nice solid morale boosting victory. And then they go and lose away to Canberra, who's a wooden spoon candidate. And I will say that game, because that they were already out by the time that game came around, basically, is because the other games in the round were played on Saturday, that the ones that mattered anyway. Newcastle Jets 2-1 down against Melbourne Victory, against an informed Melbourne Victory team too, 2-1 down with 10 minutes to go. They score a couple late goals, a banger at the end to win it. They win 3-2. And then who was the other team? Western Sydney Wanderers won as well in their game, which the Newcastle game didn't eliminate the Phoenix, but it put them on the brink because it meant that they needed Newcastle to drop points against Adelaide next week. But then that didn't even matter because Western Sydney won, and that did eliminate the Phoenix. So them putting in a subpar performance against Canberra is sort of like, well, the air had gone out of the balloon at that point. They already knew they were eliminated. So I'm not actually surprised they turned in something less than what they're capable of, because I think they've been working towards something and then it's been taken away from them. The season was effectively over. They'll bounce back with I'm sure, a solid performance against Western Sydney on the weekend. That'd be a nice little bit of a revenge game as well. Team that eliminated us, well, let's go and beat you and maybe eliminate you next week, But yeah, they've not been a stoic team. They've not been a grinding week to week kind of team. The men have. I think the men, that applies completely to them, because we've seen them going away in very tough conditions and battling for draws sometimes when the win wasn't available to them, still getting in there and making sure they come away with something. That kind of mentality is massive. And just their ability to, week after week after week, continue to play to a high standard, nice consistent standard. The women have not had that because their away form has been so bad. And you can see that in certain ways. Like there's not that much that's separated. Like a lot of those away games have been single goal defeats, just like this Canberra one was. It's just I don't know, the margins are small, but the margins are notable. Like there's just something that they can't quite get over that last step in order to turn those ones into the kind of results that they needed to be in the top 6. So ultimately, like, you don't really deserve to be in the top 6 if you only won 2 away games all season. But yeah, and maybe therefore that was a bit much to ask, like to go from wooden spoon to top half of the table straight away in one swoop. It's obviously something that's possible, but because that's the thing, they've missed their main season objective but also maybe that objective was asking a little bit too much to expect that, other than just seeing it as something that might happen if they can step things up, because they've made big improvements in the first 2 years of their existence. Maybe not as much of an improvement as we hoped, but maybe that was unrealistic. I don't know. I think it gets into more unrealistic territory when you start to consider um, some of the particularly the injuries. I think there's been a lot of rotation in player management and trying to be careful with players throughout a lot, which I don't think has necessarily helped them. But like in terms of there's just changes to the lineup every time. But then also you just look at the serious injuries that were enforced upon them, and most specifically, like I think Marissa Vandermeer is not necessarily the first person people would think of in that situation, but I think she was an enormous season-altering loss, because not only is she a good, solid centre back who's coming off a strong season last time, can also play at fullback if that's what they require of her. She's the player who makes Mickey Foster's corner kicks so dangerous, because she's the one who wins the header. Part of the reasons why she moved into centre back was because there are injuries elsewhere, but the reason why she stayed in centre back last year is because she wins all the headers when teams cross in. What have the Phoenix been doing lately? Conceding a lot of headers and conceding a lot of set piece goals. It's a very specific thing where their best player at combating this has hardly played all season because she did her ACL. And obviously, like Grace Wadneski could have been a big help. Losing Rebecca Lake for the last couple games, I think, was pretty damning as well. Like, and not to mention just little chippy injuries. I think the loss of Chloe Knott as well. It's not an injury, but when she, I don't know what the word is, when she abdicated her position, they were in good form when she left, and she's the kind of all-round midfielder. Like, they got some good defensive midfielders, they got some good attacking midfielders. Here's someone who can actually do a bit of both of those things to a strong standard. I think they ended up missing her more than maybe they expected to, for someone who was sort of like fringe. Is she first 11? Is she not first 11? I don't know. Probably her presence in the squad as well. So there's a lot of these things where they had to try. They didn't always get the luck they would have required, and they were probably good enough to be a top six if some of those injuries and absences had been avoided. But that's football for you, isn't it? Over a long season, you get those kind of things, and the depth of your squad is going to be tested a bit. And I think there's a lot of progress they've made. Just maybe wasn't quite as much progress as they were aiming to make, but that doesn't mean it wasn't still a progressive season.
What did you make of the All Whites? I think they had a 1-0 loss to Egypt. What did you make of that performance? They do re-up quickly, I think, against Tunisia.
Yeah, against Tunisia tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Yeah, 1-0 loss is their favorite result at the moment. It's just
having not read your deep dive into that game, but seeing the general consensus and just what you just said there, is it, you're kind of outlining like this is a regular occurrence for the All Whites, but it's not necessarily a major negative. It's just how the All Whites are stationed in the international footballing context. Feels similar to my White Ferns vibe that we'll touch on soon, where it's just the same thing. And I don't know, I'm not trying to frame this as a negative or positive, because the White Ferns did beat England, and I do think the All Whites in New Zealand football is rather positive right now, except there's just the results for the Football Ferns and the All Whites aren't there. But as far as analysing it and writing about it and talking about it, it's just the same thing. So there's only so many ideas and stats and observations you can make when these teams are just doing the same thing over and over again. How does that sit with you about the All Whites? And it feels like there's a bit more of a positive tinge to that observation about the All Whites.
Yeah, I think there is, because I think I find the while I was writing about it, I found the comparison between the All Whites and the Football Ferns actually kind of like kind of buzzy, just how much of a comparison there was, considering I think there's sort of a different perspective or perception about those two teams. I can see it as well with the White Ferns, but I will say with the White Ferns, I think they've gotten worse to be in this position, whereas I think the All Whites have improved to get into this position. Both of them are kind of up against a brick wall, Football Ferns as well. But yeah, there's a little bit of a sinking versus a rising thing. And that's probably why the All Whites, it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like a damning thing about them yet, is because not that long ago, the idea of only losing to Egypt 1-0 was actually pretty exceptional result. It's the kind of thing they weren't capable of doing. It's certainly not in any kind of consistent way, or being like, one goal away from a lot of these results. They've had narrow defeats against Australia. They had obviously the narrow defeat against Costa Rica. There was Peru just before that. There was the Dr. Congo game where they did get a late goal. It was a late penalty, but it was a 1-1 draw kind of thing. Like these kind of Congo, by the way, I think knocked Egypt out of the African Cup of Nations recently on penalties, and went on to finish fourth. So that's actually quite a good Congo team. They fourth place in the African Cup of Nations a few months after the All Whites got a draw against them. Pretty decent. They had a draw against Ireland as well. They weren't as good against Greece, but that was a game that they weren't entirely out of throughout. Like they're getting competitive in all of these games, and that's a place that the All Whites haven't necessarily been in, where they could consistently step out and compete with these kinds of teams over and over and over again. But there's a brick wall involved, and that brick wall is the fact they can't seem to score any goals, and not just that they didn't score goals against Egypt, because that's one thing. That's a really good Egyptian defense. They didn't do well at the AFCON last year. This year, they got knocked out in the first round of knockouts, and I think they drew all three of their group stage games to progress. But the time before that, 2021, they made the final, but they made the final without winning a single knockout game in 90 minutes. There was one game that went to extra time and they won. I think that might have been against Morocco. There were three games on their way to the AFCON final in 2021, which were 0-0 draws after 120 minutes that went to penalty shootouts. They won the first two of those penalty shootouts, and then they lost the final on the penalty shootout. So that's a good Egyptian defensive team. They don't score a lot of goals either, but they do defend extremely well. I think we saw that a lot against in that All Whites game, where as frustrating as it is because of how it fits into the pattern of the All Whites not being able to create enough chances, I do think also it fits into a pattern of how this Egyptian team plays too. And that's something that needs to be given credit or perspective, context, I guess, is that, there was a lot of beautiful midfield work from the All Whites. They were progressing the ball nicely. Defenders were stepping up. They were finding little overloads and 1-2s and things like this. And then they hit that brick wall on the edge of the Egyptian penalty box. But that's also what Egypt was setting up to do, was to allow the All Whites to progress, but only to a point, and then they combat them and stop them. And that's what they did throughout that game. And the All Whites need to figure out better ways to create stuff, but also this was one of the tougher defenses they've been up against. However, it does play into this recurring theme, which is the same recurring theme the Football Ferns have been going through. I looked it up, and if you take out the games against Oceania opponents, the All Whites have scored 5 goals in their last 13 internationals. The Football Ferns have scored 5 goals in their last 13 internationals. That's identical, that's not one is worse than the other. That's exactly the same. In fact, actually, if you wanted to split hairs, the Football Ferns have 2 wins from those 13 games. The All Whites only have 1 win from those 13 games. The Football Ferns have actually been a little bit better. And this is the All Whites probably in the first time for a long time, maybe the first time ever, I don't know, starting to consistently play a lot of teams who are ranked sort of in that top, 40 to 50 range quite regularly, which the Football Ferns have been doing for quite a while. It's a little bit of a different thing. It's more top 30 in the women's game than top 50, but they've been playing a lot of these teams who are better than them and not quite being able to catch up to them. The All Whites are now experiencing that. So there's a lot of parallels, not to mention the fact that this was an All Whites team without Chris Wood, without Tim Payne, without Joe Bell, take out 3 starters. Well, what have the Football Ferns struggled with often? replacing their best players when they're unavailable. Like there's another parallel there. So strangely, it's one thing to repeat yourself writing about the same team. It's another thing to repeat yourself writing about two different teams.
I hope you're meditating, because when I repeat my White Ferns ideas, it does drive me
Yeah.
insane. And I have empathy for you doing it with both football teams. But I am curious, who was your favourite player? Who stood out for you for the All Whites against Egypt, and maybe someone to watch out for when they do play Tunisia on Wednesday?
I thought Michael Boxall was excellent. I thought actually Clayton Lewis had a really good game stepping in for Joe Bell's position. I thought he was strong. But there is absolutely no doubt whatsoever that the best and the favorite player is Sarpreet Singh, who once again was just like head and tails above the rest of the All Whites dudes and just out there. I think him and Boxall shared the most touches, which is fantastic. But like that's obviously centre backs are going to get a lot of touches because they get those little build up passes just passing back and forth between each other. But for an attacking midfielder to be getting as many touches, that shows he's getting real involved. He's getting, he's pulling some strings there. He's linking up. He's getting those 1-2s going. It's beautiful. However, he did have to drop quite deep to get a few of those touches in order to instigate things. And it's hard to be the guy who instigates a move and also finishes the move off. So he can't be in two places at once. They did miss Chris Wood a lot for that reason, and also Sarpreet Singh because of that, because of his very obvious influence of being like the puppet master out there, did get hacked. They were not afraid to foul him. There were twice as many fouls as there were shots in this game. Some of that goes down to the All Whites too. They were fouling a bit as well, but Egypt definitely committing a lot more of those, and several of them. I think there was at least like 4 fouls on Sarpreet's thing. But like the treatment Ben Old gets for the Wellington Phoenix, he had to deal with that. But it's once again, it's like you see him play these games because he was magnificent against Ireland when they played the previous time. And then he goes back and hardly gets a game for his club teams in Germany. And it's just like he's like transcendently good when he plays for the national team. I have no idea how we've got this inexplicable situation where he is struggling at these club games where he's dominated that level before. He knows, like, we know he can play that level. His coach should know he can play that level, but it's just it's a weird thing. But I guess the All Whites are benefiting from the fact he's always fresh and available and willing to play. So that helps, I guess.
We are the sons of Sarpi, so we do love Sarpreet Singh balling out for Aotearoa. And what you're saying about like Sarpreet Singh starting and then finishing moves, which can't happen. The thing in my mind was Dylan Martinez-Lesniak, if he was like first receiver for the Warriors and then he also finishes in the corner. It's impossible to do, and it never happens, and it's hard to expect the All Whites to score goals. Well, it's hard to expect Sarpreet Singh to do that for the All Whites as well.
He got as close as anyone, though. He did win a free kick on the edge of the box from one of those several fouls, and then he whipped that free kick onto the crossbar. So, he almost did it all himself. Win a free kick, score the free kick, player of the day, it almost happened, but not quite.
Plunket Shield cricket is currently being played. We do have that unofficial final between Wellington and Northern Districts. We've got Central versus Otago in Napier, and we've got Auckland versus Canterbury in Auckland. There's a couple of players I want to touch on. I do want to highlight the Northern Districts for Wellington versus Wellington game does have Tim Southey involved, and that's cool. Shout out Tim Southey. But he has kind of taken the place of Christian Clark, who is having a fantastic season, and Northern Districts are in the position they're in part thanks to Christian Clark, who is 4th for wickets in the Plunket Shield. 27 wickets and an average of 24. He's behind Scott Kugelheim as the leading wicket taker for Northern Districts, but this brings a couple of storylines to the fore because Christian Clark's a fantastic young cricketer in Aotearoa, and he's bumped out due to Tim Southey coming back. But also, Northern Districts are playing two spinners on their home deck in Hamilton Seton Park. They got the Walker Bros, Freddie and Joe, as their spinners. So I don't want to draw a direct line between Tim Southey coming back and bumping Christian Clark out of the team, because they could have selected Christian Clark and one spinner, but they've gone with the two spinners on their Seton Park pitch. So it is unlucky. It's an unfortunate situation for Christian Clark. He won't be playing. He isn't playing this last game, but he is a fantastic young cricketer. Let me get some basic information up here. 23 years old, and as I've said a few times, he's fantastic. He's averaging 30 or below in all three formats, but he's not playing this round. Who are playing this round? Who is playing this round? Well, Gareth Severin's playing for Wellington in that unofficial final, and he scored 80 runs in this game, which is fantastic for him, because him and Dale Phillips, who scored 144 for Otago, they're the best young batters in Aotearoa this summer in the Plunket Shield. And at the time of recording, how about this one? They're the two leading run scorers in the Plunket Shield. Dale Phillips is first. Obviously, there's another innings to play and whatnot. He's currently first for runs, 2 centuries, 4 half centuries, and Gareth Severin is second for runs, 2 centuries, 4 half centuries. That's just really good for them. Shout out to them. The two best young batters in Aotearoa this summer in Plunket Shield are also the two best batters in Plunket Shield. So that's good. That's good for Aotearoa cricket. Dale Phillips and Gareth Severin scoring runs. And who is my favourite domestic cricketer?
Well, you could say Tom Blundell, who's got 100. That might, but I have a feeling you're leading towards Zach Foulkes here.
Yeah, when have I ever said Tom Blundell's my favourite domestic cricketer?
He needed runs. He got some runs.
He did need runs. He did get some runs. Shout out to him. We'll touch on this in the subscriber podcast, recap this full round of Plunket Shield cricket. And it's big time of runs for Tommy Blundell. In a must-win game, winner is the champion of the Plunket Shield. So he's scoring important runs. Pity he couldn't do it for the Black Caps this summer. However, my favourite domestic cricketer is Zach Foulkes. And he's 21 years old. He took a fifer against Auckland. And also shout out Jordan Sussex, because Jordan Sussex is bagging wickets for fun at the moment. He took 8 wickets in that game against Canterbury, and he's a monster, but he's only played like 3 first-class games at the age of 30. So shout out to him. But Zach Foulkes took 5 wickets against Auckland. He's 21 years old. He's averaging 26 in first-class cricket, 22 in List A cricket, and 15 in T20 cricket. The thing I love about Zach Foulkes, and I've seen, so again, the thing I was saying about the Warriors versus the Raiders, and just going back in my memory banks and images, flashes of Warriors bursting through holes in the Raiders' defensive line. I've seen it a lot over the last 2 summers of Zach Foulkes getting Sean Solier and Jeet Raval out. Obviously, Zach Foulkes, he gets a lot of batters out. I mean, he's averaging less than 27 in all 3 formats at 21 years old. So he's getting a lot of batters out. But there's a lot of the times when I'm checking the videos of the wickets, he's getting Sean Solier and Jeet Raval out similar ways. And this is interesting because Sean Solier and Jeet Raval are 2 really good batters. They're both lefties though. So the thing about Zach Foulkes is he bowls outswing to lefties. And last summer in the Plunket Shield, I remember there was one game where he got Jeet Raval caught behind the wicket. So I don't know if it was caught behind wicketkeeper or in the slips, but 2 innings in one game, same dismissal. And that's because he's bowling outswing to Jeet Raval. And I have made a little clip of Zach Foulkes versus Sean Solier, getting him hitting his stumps with the same delivery, outswing to the left-hander. So the ball angles in, then it nips away from the lefty. And that's how he got Sean Solier out again. Maybe it was an edge, can't exactly remember. But every time I see a Zach Foulkes highlight against Northern Districts or against Auckland, he's usually getting Jet Raval and Sean Solier out with very unique ways. And that's the thing I've said about Zach Foulkes this whole time, that he has been playing domestic cricket. And it's the same thing I say about all these funky young seamers, is they are skillful. They do things slightly different. Ben Lister is like, he's the lefty equivalent of Zach Foulkes. Because Zach Foulkes is a right-hander bowling outswing to left-handers. Ben Lister is a lefty who nips the ball away from right-handers. Now, if you get Zach Foulkes bowling to a right-hander, he's bowling hoop and in-swingers, attacking the stumps, attacking the edge. And he's a really good young cricketer. So shout out Zach Foulkes, shout out Gareth Severin and Dale Phillips as well. Zach Foulkes isn't one of the leading wicket takers. He's averaging in the mid-20s this season in Plunket Shield, but he did take a fifer and he does take wickets for fun. Good all-round cricketer for Canterbury. And that's some real positive stuff. So shout out to the Plunket Shield. We'll be touching on that in the subscriber podcast on Thursday. Keeping with the positive tune, there's
a parallel. We've established there's a parallel.
I set up this big segue and then I misspoke and threw up the wrong team. Then we redo it. Speaking of real positive things, the White Ferns beat England. How about that? They won the third T20 in Nelson. Susie Bates came out of nowhere to bowl the last over. It was amazing. Sophie Devine's in great form. Amelia Kerr's in great form. Susie Bates, apparently she's in great form with bat and ball. So shout out to them. Shout out to the White Ferns. But they're also 2-1 down in the series. And there's not much happening. First and foremost, if this was a 3-match series, it's typical White Ferns. They lose the first 2 games, they win the 3rd game. That is exactly what happened in the T20s in New Zealand against Pakistan in December. And it's the White Ferns series sweep. We've talked about it a few times now. The White Ferns win the game that doesn't mean anything. Thankfully, this T20 series is a 5-match banger, so they're still in the series. They're down 2-1, 2 games to play. Last 2 games of the T20 series are being played in Wellington, and apparently everyone can do a little poi dance now, so shout out to that little initiative. It is a really strange situation, though, for a few reasons for the White Ferns. First and foremost, Eden Carson was only selected for 3 games in this T20 series. The first 3 games. And she will be replaced by Lee Kasprick for the last 2 games. So what did the White Ferns do? Eden Carson didn't play a game. The idea of selecting a player who is one of the best T20 bowlers in New Zealand right now, to me personally, given she's an excellent fielder, fantastic competitor, I think Eden Carson's just straight up one of the best cricketers in New Zealand right now for the White Ferns depth chart, women's cricket. But the idea of selecting a player for 3 games specifically, they could have just selected Eden Carson for 5 games.
Or by the sounds of it, they could have just not selected her.
Yeah, either way, just do something. It's all good. But you select the player for 3 games and then she doesn't play in those 3 games. That is very strange. But it's the White Ferns. So to be honest, I expect it. And I expect Lee Kasprick not to play in these last 2 games. It's all cool. recall for Lee Kasprick. She returns to the White Ferns. Well, she might not play. But it is in Wellington, so she might play because she's a base and reserve is her home deck, so it would be a nice spot for her to play. But if Lee Kasprick does play, then why didn't Eden Carson play? It doesn't make much sense. And it doesn't make much sense when Hannah Rowe, she's got 1 wicket and 5 overs, conceding 9.8 RPO. Jess Kerr has 1 wicket and 8 overs, conceding 5.7 RPO. Rosemary Mair, seamer extraordinaire of the Kiwi summer, earns her way back into the White Ferns. 2 wickets at 7.8 RPO in 12 overs. Leah Tahuhu was the best bowler for the White Ferns in T20 cricket last year. Guess who was second? Eden Carson. Leah Tahuhu, she's bowled 8 overs. She's got 2 wickets at 9.2 RPO. The only White Ferns seamer who's actually doing anything is Sophie Devine. So shout out to her. She's got 4 wickets, 8.8 RPO in 6 overs. But so the 4 best bowlers for the White Ferns, 3 of them are spinners. If we're counting Suzie Bates as a spinner. She's a bit more of a dibbly-dobbler, but she's she might be a spinner. So I still think the best bowlers for the White Ferns are spinners, and there's no reason why Amelia Kerr, Fran Jonas, and Eden Carson can't be in the same team regardless of conditions, because they're the best bowlers. And if we just stash the weird Eden Carson selection thing over there, and then we compare, well, okay, you're not selecting Eden Carson, but you are selecting these seamers who aren't really doing anything. The nonsensicalness of the situation increases. It's very strange. I don't understand. But the White Ferns won a game. So shout out to them. The rest is pretty, again, and I'll throw it to you in a second because you did highlight in the Friday newsletter the performances of the best players when they win and when they lose. And that's still the same thing here. The best players for the White Ferns so far in 3 games, Sophie Devine, Amelia Kerr, Suzie Bates. No one else is really doing anything, and that's the same old situation that has led the White Ferns to lose more games than they win right now. Part of that issue in this series has been Maddie Green, who was on the up and up, and I had highlighted that she was on the up and up until the start of the series, and now she's got 25 runs in 3 games at a strike rate of 64. For batters who have scored over 10 runs, that's the lowest strike rate. And that's the only strike rate below 85. So Maddie Green's in a bit of a hole. I feel like Eden Carson's situation is insane, given everything we just talked about, but it's not the most insane thing in the series. That is the wicketkeeper situation. Because, straight up, Izzy Gaze is not the best wicketkeeper in New Zealand. And it's, at the moment, it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch because I feel sorry for her. It's not hard to watch because of the errors. It's hard to watch because I feel sorry for Izzy Gaze that she is in this position making those errors. And it's the thing I've said before, where good wicket keepers, the ball just goes straight in the gloves. Whatever cricketing science you want to put behind it, whether it's moving your feet, staying low, having your head over the ball,
soft hands,
all those little wicket keeping technique things that goes into good wicket keepers doing the Rocco Berry, vacuuming up that ball. Good wicket keepers, the ball sticks to their gloves. Unfortunately for Izzy Gaze, the ball bounces out of her gloves all the time. And she will make a spectacular play. But 9 out of 10 times the ball bounces out of her gloves. And this is international cricket. The White Ferns are playing international cricket with someone who is not an international caliber wicketkeeper. And again, if Sophie Devine wants to say there's no depth in New Zealand cricket, well, the best wicketkeeper's not playing, so that sounds like we've got great depth, because we don't need our best wicketkeeper to play. The depth is so good that the best wicketkeeper isn't required. That's how good the depth is. Izzy Gaze doesn't score runs either. So she's not the best wicketkeeper, and she's got a ODI average of 9. She's got a T20 average of 7. That's so weird.
Not as weird as the first game when they promoted her to open with that record, though. And then she looked like she was going to get out first ball, and then she literally ran herself out second ball, which wasn't glorious.
But it gets weirder.
Oh, hey, there's more.
So the best wicketkeeper for New Zealand isn't playing. Jess McFadden, I think, is the best wicketkeeper. I think Polly Ingalls might be the second best wicketkeeper. Shout out to her. She is playing for New Zealand A. But the White Ferns don't even know who their best wicketkeeper is. So this is just T20 cricket, going back to when they toured South Africa last year. And prior to that series against South Africa starting, Bernadine Bezuidenhout, she was suffering an illness, so she had to return to New Zealand. So what happens? Izzy Gaze is there. She's the wicketkeeper in a game that was eventually washed out. What happens in the next game? Oh, we just brush aside Izzy Gaze, we'll go with Maddie Green. So Maddie Green becomes the wicketkeeper for 2 games, a win and a loss. All good. I don't think Izzy Gaze is a White Ferns wicketkeeper solution. So we're going with Maddie Green now. All right. But then they come back to New Zealand, and in 2 losses against Pakistan, Bezuidenhout is the wicketkeeper. The White Ferns did get a win when it didn't matter against Pakistan. Who was the wicketkeeper there? Izzy Gaze.
Don't change your winning team.
And now we've got 4 games in a row of T20 cricket with Izzy Gaze as the wicketkeeper. Ultimately, this boils down to 3 different wicketkeepers being used for 3 different T20 series. Meanwhile, the best wicketkeeper doesn't get an opportunity. It's really strange. But the White Ferns won a game, so shout out to them.
And those 3 wicketkeepers that you mentioned, Bezuidenhout, Gaze, and also Green, is a little bit more of a part-timer, but, you know, she kept in a couple of those games, are all playing in this 11. Like, they've all been playing throughout the series, all 3 of them. And that just seems weird. Like, I think, because that even affects, like, the Maddie Green situation, who's someone who has a rare player in recent times who's come out of that. Like, there's the big 3 or 4 like key star players, the world-class talent who, when they perform, the White Ferns can win. When they don't perform, the White Ferns don't have a hope because no one else steps up, kind of thing. Maddie Green is a rare example of someone who's gone from the rest of the team into being on par with, you know, those better players. But she does bat really slow. And she's batting at 5 in this team, which is like a closer's role. Like, you're either coming in at 30 for 3 or something, or it might be worse than that, or you're coming in at like 100 for 3 and trying to up the ante and score runs, and she is a slow batter. And she's a very good batter, but she's a slow batter in a position where she's expected to score quickly. It's like even that doesn't make a lot of sense. But like if she was a wicketkeeper batter, it would make a little bit more sense to fit that around. But then you've also got to find room for Gaze. It's like you could just Bezuidenhout could be the keeper, and then Gaze doesn't play, and then there's the Eden Carson's role. You don't even have to drop one of the seamers. You just get to pick and choose who gets their 4 overs today based on who's bowling well or whatever. Like the stuff doesn't really hold up to a lot of scrutiny, does it?
Yeah, I think the green wicket-keeping stuff, like, that was partly due to Bezuidenhout being out of the South Africa series.
And that was an away tour, wasn't it? So
Yeah.
you can't just bring in another keeper, right?
I think Matty Green wicket-keeping is similar to, like, Devon Conway wicket-keeping. You can do it. It's not ideal. Matty Green's also a fantastic fielder, so you want her in the field. But you can also select Eden Carson as another fantastic fielder. You know, there's different ways of doing that. But, like, ultimately, Bezuidenhout and Izzy Gaze have been selected in the last 2 series just as batters at different stages. Neither of them are good enough to do that.
Like, Bezuidenhout's closer than Gaze, obviously, but like,
Bezuidenhout is getting an opportunity because she does have powerful shots. Like, we've seen that before. Like, that is why she's there. She's not a better batter than Kate Anderson or Georgia Plummer. So it's like we're not selecting the best batters. We're not selecting the best wicketkeepers. To be honest, we're not even selecting the best bowlers. This is why the White Ferns don't win. But they did win a game, so shout out to them. But
there's no depth. There's no depth. That's the problem. Did you hear Frankie Mackay mention that on the commentary in the third game? I think it was who was it? The English commentator who was
Alex Hartley.
Alex Hartley,
like the
excellent.
TVNZ commentators, aside from Francis Mackay, Katie Martin kind of balances this line, but like they're cheerleaders. Let's be honest. And then you get Alex Hartley, and she's saying like, "This is really bad," and you're like, "Oh my gosh, thank you."
Analysis. Wow.
Thank you for just saying what you see, because these other commentators can't say a bad thing about the White Ferns. Meanwhile, Alex Hartley comes in, and when there's bad cricket played from the White Ferns, when the White Ferns collapse, when the White Ferns fumble a winnable position over and over again, Alex Hartley is there to tell us it's happening. So shout out to her, as you're saying.
Yeah, she brought it up. She mentioned the thing about Sophie Devine coming back into the team with some controversial comments, and I think Frankie Mackay said something along the lines of, a generous thing would be controversial. Perhaps you might also use the word offensive. And then it just cut to an ad break, and that was the end of their commentary stint. They don't come back to elaborate or anything like that. Just dangle a little I was going to say it's like the clickbait headline-y type thing that gets aggregated, but no one's going to do that for the White Ferns, so that's not going to happen. But yeah, it was a tantalizing little insight there. Frankie Mackay, of course, is one of the players who is still a very active domestic player who might be playing in these games instead of commentating on these games in another world.
She is the depth.
Yeah.
So
she's the one that seems to target, yeah.
So she might find it offensive if she is the depth player when the skipper of the team is saying there's no depth players, which is absolutely ridiculous. But the thing is, Susie Bates, Amelia Kerr, and Sophie Devine are playing well. So I'm still trying to keep an open mind. I know it sounds like I'm taking the piss with the White Ferns did win a game thing, but the White Ferns win when Susie Bates, Amelia Kerr, and Sophie Devine are playing good cricket. And they are 2-1 in this series because those three are playing good cricket. Everything outside of that is just, what are you doing? Like I can't say these players suck or what are these players doing? These players are out of form, because there is no faith that players are selected for their best roles, or there's no faith in the White Ferns system to bring the best out of these players. Because Izzy Gaze was playing all right for New Zealand A, and then she sucks for the White Ferns. Like, players are not put in positions to succeed for the White Ferns. And to be honest, when you get into the White Ferns, unlike the Black Caps, when you get into the Black Caps squad, you get better. Your fielding gets better. Your strength and conditioning training gets better. Your whole skill range gets better. You become a better cricketer just by being in the Black Caps environment. I think players get worse when they get into the White Ferns environment. And if that's the case, the only way for the White Ferns to win is Suzie Bates, Amelia Kerr, and Sophie Devine.
But they did win a game. They did win that third game. So, you know, and largely on the back of those players. And then having set up a big total in which all three of them scored runs, they then nearly lost it until one of them had to come in and bowl the last over and take a couple wickets and save things. So nothing's changed on that count. I might, because I only looked at the run scoring when I was breaking down those things. I might have to look at what the like bowling looks like in wins and losses and T20s and ODIs next after, probably after this series. We'll see what that looks like. Because I suspect that might be almost a little bit more educational, because all the other run scoring told us was just like, yeah, the three best players, borderline four best players, because Matty Green's had some good innings. He's been up there amongst them in the last few years anyway. They're pretty good even when they lose, but they're a lot better when they win. And when they win, those players score all the runs. And when they don't, no one else is doing anything. Like, that's kind of just filling in a blank that we already knew was the case. So I wonder what it would look like with bowling, but that's a tale for another day.
The last thing I'd say is, in that third T20, after England had comprehensively beaten the White Ferns in the first two games, England collapsed to their loss. The White Ferns didn't really do anything to, apart from the final over with Suzie Bates and some good fielding, like Rosemary Mayer and Amelia Kerr had direct hits for runouts. So that's good. But if the recipe for getting the win is relying on England to collapse, good luck with that.
Yeah, it's probably not happening three times in a 5-game series, I don't think. So, yeah, we'll see.
We'll see how we go. The White Ferns are playing that fourth T20 International tomorrow on Wednesday, so we'll be touching on that in the subscriber podcast as well, which is available for paid Substack subscribers and on Patreon. Big up for everyone for supporting us as we do our best to broadcast Aotearoa sporting excellence. Big yarns on our website, theniche-case.com. Look after yourself. Kia kaha, stay beautiful. Chur chur.